Going live.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this Youth Affairs Council Victoria and Social Security Rights Victoria webinar on COVID-19 and income support payments. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the custodians of the land from which I'm hosting this evening, which is the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and also pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. I also want to extend that respect to all the custodians of the land from where you're joining us this evening. My name is Luke. I am from YACVic. YACVic is the peak body and leading advocate for young people aged 12 to 25 and youth workers in Victoria. Our vision is that the rights of young people in Victoria are respected and they are active, visible and valued in their communities. Tonight is the second in a series of webinars and resources we're creating to support you now and over the next year as we collectively work together through this pandemic. We know that more people now than ever need access to a social security net. And this webinar is all about how to apply for income support payments, a little bit about what they are and what to do when things go wrong. I am joined by Anna and Bryn from Social Security Rights Victoria, who are experts on income support payments and everything to do with them. Tonight we want to hear your questions. You can use the chat box on Zoom or you can comment directly on the video on Facebook Live. Please send in your questions at any time. So I'm joined by Anna and Bryn tonight. Anna Morrow is a community lawyer at Social Security Rights Victoria. Anna is currently working on SSRV's Worker Helpline and Family Violence Project. The Worker Helpline is a telephone advice line that provides social security and family assistance legal advice to workers who are supporting vulnerable Victorians. The Family Violence Project explores the intersection between family violence and social security law through providing advice, casework, community legal education, and policy and advocacy. Bryn Overend is the principal lawyer at Social Security Rights Victoria, who is also joining us this evening, and you'll hear from Bryn in just a moment. Bryn oversees SSRV's legal practice and provides advice and representation for vulnerable Victorians seeking to challenge social security decisions. Bryn has worked for several years in the community legal sector, working with vulnerable and disadvantaged Australians, including at Victoria Legal Aid and in Alice Springs at the Central Australian Aboriginal Legal Service, now the NAAJA. So I'm going to hand over to Bryn to begin. Bryn, if you just want to say hello and tell us your pronouns. My pronouns are he, him.
Yes, same, he, him. Also, thank you so much, Luke. Thanks for having us tonight. We're really glad to be here, and it's great to be involved. So yes, as Luke said, my name's Bryn. I'm the principal lawyer at Social Security Rights Victoria. I'm going to try to share my screen now, and hopefully we can get into the meat of my part of the presentation. After which I'll hand over to Anna. So let me just link that up, and I hope that's all worked. Okay, so social security rights, that's who we are. I'd first like to start, of course, by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands upon which we're presenting as well, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, their elders past and present, and acknowledge that their culture and connection to land does continue to today. Okay, so a little bit of an overview of what I'd like to cover before handing over to Anna. I'm going to talk a little bit about our service, so you know what we do, what we're all about, and how you can get in contact with us if you have any issues and if you believe that we might be able to help. And then I'm going to talk about social security payments and pensions in light of this current crisis, this pandemic that we're facing, COVID-19. That's going to be our focus tonight. Obviously, there's a lot of other information we could cover in relation to social security payments and social security law, but we're taking that particular lens given its prominence in our everyday lives right now and how it's affecting people. So then I'll talk about applying for payments and pensions, and I'll talk about Centrelink decisions, so decisions by Service Australia or Centrelink, and how we can challenge those decisions and any complaints that if people do have any issues. And then, as I said, I'll be handing over to Anna, who works on our Family Violence and Social Security project and she'll be covering the intersection of family violence and social security. Okay, so Social Security Rights Victoria. Who are we? Well, we're an independent organisation. We're not Centrelink. We are a statewide community legal centre. Now, what does community legal centre mean? It means we're a free organisation, or our services are free, and we provide services across the state. We are small. We are based in Melbourne, but we do provide services across the state. And we specialise in social security law, policy and procedure. And we are particularly focused on assisting people who are vulnerable and disadvantaged, and who have a Centrelink decision that they believe is wrongful and they want to challenge. And we, of course, work with others as well to highlight and change unfair laws and processes. Now, more specifically, our services include a telephone advice line, and that involves having a general advice line, which is currently operating Monday to Thursday, which is extended at the moment during the pandemic. That's between 9:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. and you can call us during those times on that number provided there, 0419 793 652, and get legal advice in regards to social security matters. We also provide representation and advocacy, including at the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, and we do strategic advocacy, as I said before, including with other peak bodies, including Economic Justice Australia, which is our national peak body, and we undertake professional development and community legal education, just like this. So I should also mention we offer a worker helpline, so if there are any community workers, nurses, financial counsellors, doctors, etc., who are watching tonight, you should note that number down as well. That's our number for secondary consultations for those people who are working with other community members, assisting them with with social security rights issues. Okay, so just some examples, just quickly, of the decisions that we can assist with. Cancellation or suspension of your pension or payment. For example, if you're on Jobseeker and your payment was suspended, and you believe that suspension was incorrect, we'll be able to potentially provide advice around that. And if it meets our casework guidelines, we may also take it on for representation. Similarly, rejection of applications for pensions and payments. We see a lot of disability support pension applications that unfortunately are not successful for those people, and we can provide advice around that, and also potentially representation. And appealing debts raised against individuals. So where Centrelink has claimed that an individual has been overpaid and that person owes them money, then we can provide, again, advice and potentially representation. Okay, so social security has its foundations in our human rights instruments, international human rights instruments, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And we can see that there. We are fortunate in Australia to have a relatively comprehensive social security network, which includes Centrelink, but other services as well. Unfortunately, it doesn't go perfectly all the time, and there are issues, and that's where we come in and can provide assistance. Our Australian social security system, just to give you some context and background, it's a Commonwealth system administered by Services Australia, which is it's a new name. That's the umbrella body, those people who are getting confused between Services Australia and Centrelink. It's the umbrella body encompassing Centrelink, Medicare and child support. And when we're talking about Centrelink, we're talking about the body that's administering the types of payments that we see for young people, for example, Oz Study, AB Study, Youth Allowance, but also other payments like a special benefit, parenting payment, DSP, carer payment, these types of payments. And I'm sure many of you will have heard of these payments, maybe have received these payments at certain times, maybe are receiving some of these payments, and that's all administered by Centrelink. Now, in terms of Social Security and Centrelink payments during this current pandemic, the government has temporarily put in place expanded eligibility and qualification criteria from 25th of March of this year. Now, I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of those expanded payments and the eligibility criteria so that you can get a bit of an insight into it. But what's going to be really important is for you to be able to go away and look at some of the resources that we have access, that we all have access to, and indeed that we refer to. And so you can empower yourself, so you can find out more information specific to your context. You can always call us as well, as I mentioned, on that general advice line. But if you are looking to get more information, these resources are really helpful. In particular, we often refer to as a basic starting point, the Guide to Australian Government Payments, which is a link there. And that provides you with the basic eligibility and qualification criteria and the asset and income tests, for example, for all of the payments that are administered by the Australian government. So that's a great starting point, which I recommend to everyone, people in the community, people who are assisting those who are receiving Centrelink payments. A great starting point. The Services Australia website is also has been developed, and there's been updates undertaken and a lot of work to try to simplify that, and it's a useful, very useful starting point. And also of assistance, particularly in regards to coronavirus related information, is the Department of Social Services website. So I'd recommend you having a look at that. Now, we've got a number of resources on our website. That's the SSRV website. And Economic Justice Australia, the peak national body for social security rights organisations, welfare organisations around Australia, that is their website, and they have a number of great fact sheets which I'd highly recommend having a look at, and which I may refer to throughout the presentation tonight, and which Anna may also refer to. Now, I also have listed there the Commonwealth Treasury website, which may also be of assistance, particularly in regards to Jobkeeper subsidy, and also the early release of super for those people who are seeking to get that. Now, if you want to get a little bit more detailed, there's also the Guide to Social Policy, which provides pretty comprehensive policy information in regards to social security payments and family assistance payments. So have a look at that if you want to get into things in a little bit more detail. Now, I should note that SSRV is not Centrelink. Centrelink specialise in processing and administering claims. We, SSRV, are specialists in reviewing decisions that are made by Centrelink and whether or not they are lawful. This will often include assessing qualification criteria, but as we go through this eligibility criteria, it's important that if you are seeking information, that a good starting point is indeed with Centrelink. Now, if you are having difficulty contacting Centrelink, or if you are having other issues, then that's certainly where we can assist, and we may, but we may not be able to necessarily solve everything if it is purely just a question that needs to go to Centrelink. So, having said that, do give us a call if you need to. Anyway, let's get into some of the payments that are affected by the new COVID-19 measures, and that may, in particular, be relevant for younger people. So, the Jobseeker payment or the youth allowance for job seekers. So, eligibility for these two payments have been expanded, in particular to assist sole traders and self-employed people. Now, in particular, for those two category of people, they'll be able to meet the mutual obligation requirements by continuing to operate their own business. And we'll talk about mutual obligations in a little while. But it's people who are permanent employees who've been stood down or lost their job may also be able to be eligible as a result of these expanded measures. And people who are caring for someone infected or in isolation or as a result of contact with coronavirus will also potentially be able to be eligible under these expanded measures. So yeah, I've summarised it there on the slide. If you're a permanent employee and you lose your employment, or if you're a permanent employee and you stood down, or if you're a sole trader, self-employed, casual or contract worker, and you lose your income, or if you're required to care for someone affected by COVID-19 and lose your income as a result, you should contact Centrelink and potentially apply for one of these payments, given the expanded eligibility. Now, the income tests still do apply for these two payments. Now, the assets test, though, has been suspended and it will not be taken into account for the period of the coronavirus supplement, which was said to be a 6-month measure. And we'll talk a little bit more about the coronavirus supplement in a little while. But this is significant, having the assets test suspended. Okay, so assets test is essentially testing whether or not someone has too big a large an asset or too significant an asset outside of their primary family home that would otherwise prevent them from accessing these payments.
Bryn, can I just ask,
Sure.
just for anyone that might not know what counts as an asset here, could you maybe explain for young people what an asset might be, or for anyone listening?
Absolutely. Yep. So an assets can be anything really that you could potentially sell or that is of value. It would have a technical definition, which I don't have off the top of my head right now, but an example, today I was chatting to an individual who had a property, and many young people won't have a property, but they don't have a car or something like that. That'll also be an asset. But this person I was speaking to today, for example, had an asset. It was a piece of land that they couldn't sell, but because they had that asset and Services Australia had revalued that asset to push them over the assets limit, and so they would no longer qualify for their particular payment. Okay, so I hope that helps. Your partner's income will be taken into account if you're applying for these two payments. So you'll only be able to access Jobseeker payment if your partner earns less than approximately $79,762 per annum, so every year. Now, in relation to the Jobseeker and Jobkeeper, two things, you may have heard of Jobkeeper. It's a program that's set up, as I mentioned before, as a subsidy for those people who have otherwise lost their jobs and have lost their jobs, and it's run not through Centrelink but through the Australian Tax Office. And so it's not, whilst it is part of a greater social security net, it's not something that we typically deal with. But just so you know a little bit about the relationship between them, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to receive both. So if, for example, you lose your job, you apply for Jobseeker payment, but then your employer it gets onto the Jobkeeper scheme, and as an employer that's been stood down, you're then eligible for the Jobkeeper payments, which are up to $1,500. You can then switch to the Jobkeeper payments and withdraw your claim for Jobseeker. It's very confusing because they're very similarly named, obviously, but Jobseeker is the Centrelink payment and Jobkeeper is the subsidy program. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, you're not going to be, it's unlikely that you'd be able to keep both, get both at the same time. Okay, so we've covered off on those two payments. Sorry, I'll just go back. If I can, no. Okay. Another payment that may be applicable to you in this current pandemic is crisis payment. So the government has now said that if you are required to be in quarantine or self-isolation as a result of either your doctor or the government directing you to do so, or you're caring for an immediate family member or a member of your household who's required to quarantine or be in self-isolation, you may be eligible for crisis payment. But there is a few key criteria here. You must contact Centrelink within 14 days after starting the quarantine or self-isolation period and let them know about your intention to claim. We'll talk about this intention to claim thing as well. And then you must also make a claim as following on from that intention to claim within 14 days. But what's significant also is that crisis payment, you need to be in severe financial hardship, and that has a strict definition. So if you are thinking that you may meet that basic criteria, get in touch with Centrelink and lodge your intention. But yeah, there is some strict criteria around that. Okay, the economic support payment. These are one-off payments, 2 of them, that are also new under the COVID-19 measures. If you have registered your intention to claim a Centrelink payment through the new registering to claim button, or you've applied for a Centrelink payment, or you are currently receiving a Centrelink payment before the 13th of April 2020, you're going to receive 2 $750 one-off economic support payments. Now, that's only if you don't then go on to receive the coronavirus supplement, which is meant to kick in from the 27th of April, 27th of this month, so in a few days. If you receive the coronavirus supplement, you will only receive the first economic support payment, which already would have been paid to you. Now, if you don't receive it, so for example, some people that wouldn't receive it include the disability support pension recipients, then they will receive the second economic support payment. And that second payment will be starting on the 13th of July. Okay, and they'll be rolled out. Now, what is the coronavirus supplement? As I said, it's $750, and it's for eligible persons, people who are receiving eligible payments. Oh, sorry, I've gotten myself confused here. So coronavirus supplement is an additional $550 a fortnight. Sorry, that's not the economic support payment. That should be differentiated. The coronavirus supplement is an extra $550 a fortnight, so an effective doubling of Jobseeker for the next 6 months during the period that they are kind of rolling these extra measures out. Now, if you are receiving these payments that are listed here, Jobseeker payment, youth allowance, Austudy, Abstudy, parenting payment, household allowance, special benefits, then you will be automatically eligible for this doubling, so this extra $550 a fortnight, okay, for the next 6 months. Now, this is obviously a very significant measure, but not all people are going to qualify for it. In particular, as I mentioned before, disability support pension recipients will not receive it. Now, as younger people, it's unlikely that there'll be there's less young people who are receiving the disability support pension than older people, but there are still a number of young people who are receiving DSP. For those who are considering Jobseeker, because it's actually, it will go up, well, Jobseeker will stay the same, but with the coronavirus supplement, the total amount will go up. For those people, they may be considering trying to get off their DSP and getting onto Jobseeker. Now, there's some very serious considerations around that, and I would ask people to have a look at the EJA website, which explains the different considerations that you need to take into account if you are thinking about trying to do that. There are a number of issues, and you really, I want to caution people before taking any dramatic steps in relation to trying to get that extra rate of pay by trying to get from DSP to Jobseeker. As I said, that probably won't apply to many young people that are listening tonight, but it may apply to a few. Okay, so there are a few of the measures that are being put in place for as part of the COVID-19 pandemic measures. Now, for many people, they want to know, well, okay, this COVID-19 is having a massive effect on me. I now need to apply for a social security payment. Maybe one of those payments, you know, many people are applying for Jobseeker in particular. As I mentioned, because Centrelink is receiving a high volume of calls and visits to their centres, they've now developed an intention to claim function on their MyGov website. So if you do want to apply or do need to apply for a social security payment, you can use this by clicking on making a MyGov account if you don't already have one. And down the bottom here, I've linked to the EJA's fact sheet, Claiming Centrelink During COVID, which will take you through the steps you need to undertake to be able to either set up a MyGov account or lodge your intention to claim. It's a great fact sheet. I'd highly recommend you having a look at it. And if you do lodge that intent to claim and then you subsequently put in the rest of your application, successful claims will then be backdated to the date of first submitting that intention to claim. Okay, so that you're really bookmarking when you first became eligible or potentially eligible. And so if you are subsequently granted that particular payment, you can be backdated to that time, which is really trying to ease the burden a little bit on Centrelink, but also is going to hopefully be beneficial for those people who can't access Centrelink services during these challenging times. Now, another thing that should be noted if you are applying for a social security payment is that fortunately some waiting periods have been waived. So if you qualify for one of the eligible payments that I mentioned earlier, you will be able to access the payment straight away, or you should be able to generally access it straight away. In particular, you won't have to serve the ordinary waiting period, okay, which is usually a 1 week for payments to start. This has been waived during the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, the liquid assets waiting period has also been waived, and that usually applies if you have funds equal to or more than either $5.5 grand if you're single with no dependents, or twice that $11,000 if you have a partner or you're single with dependents. So by dependents, I mean people who you're taking care of, you know, typically children. So that has also been waived. And there's also the seasonal work preclusion period, which has been waived. Okay, and that's where you or your partner have finished doing some seasonal, intermittent or contract work in the prior 6 months, and you are still waiting to be paid. And Centrelink is saying, well, you have to wait until you actually receive that money. That's that seasonal work preclusion period. Again, that's been waived. And if you're already serving one of these periods, it will be waived. Okay. The newly arrived residence waiting period has also temporarily been waived. So what that is, for those people who aren't aware, that newly arrived Australian residents may have to wait 2 or 4 years before they can get access to Centrelink payments and benefits. But yeah, it has been waived. But note that when this coronavirus supplement ceases in September 2020, you may be required to serve any remaining period, but the time that you're receiving the coronavirus supplement will account towards that period. Okay. The income maintenance and compensation preclusion periods, they will still apply. Okay, for those of you who aren't aware, income maintenance periods is an amount of time you may need to wait before you get a payment, because when you left or lost your job, your employer paid you a certain amount of money as a result of that exit. And the preclusion period is usually related to compensation, where the compensation, there's a time period that's calculated on the basis of the compensation you received, which is usually corresponding to a particular time period for the compensation that you're paid. So that compensation period still applies. So does income maintenance, and that's because they are treated as income. And you can also not access annual leave, sick leave, or income protection insurance at the same time as receiving your Jobseeker payment or your youth allowance Jobseeker payment. So again, this is really going back to the rule that the income tests do still apply. So if you're not declaring your income fully to Centrelink or informing Centrelink honestly about your income and your other circumstances, there is a risk that you may receive a debt in the future, and there is also a risk of prosecution in certain circumstances. So just make sure that you are providing all of the accurate information to Centrelink when you are applying for one of those payments or at any time. Now, for those people who are going to be on Jobseeker or youth allowance Jobseeker, it's worth keeping in mind that mutual obligations have been suspended again as part of these COVID-19 measures. And we've had an update yesterday that mutual obligations have been suspended until the 22nd of May. It was extended from the 27th of April to the 22nd of May. Now, for those people who aren't aware of mutual obligations, they may not have been on Jobseeker. That means things like attending appointments, looking for work, going and doing activities that are set out in the agreement that you might have with your job service provider, who you'll be assigned to as part of the Jobseeker program. The Jobseeker is a payment for people who are out of work, and the theory is that Centrelink is trying to link you in to get you back into the workforce. I should have mentioned at the start, for those who aren't aware, Jobseeker, many of you will be the old New Start. Now, Jobseeker actually amalgamates a few different payments, but if I'm talking about Jobseeker, I'm talking about New Start for all effects and purposes tonight. Now, regardless of the suspension of mutual obligations, you may also be able to get an exemption on the basis of a major personal crisis. So more specifically related to the COVID-19, if you can't meet your mutual obligations requirements due to isolation, you may be granted a major personal crisis exemption without having to provide evidence, such as a medical certificate. Okay. So if you are granted a major personal crisis exemption, then you get a 14-day exemption from your mutual obligations. But as I said, at this stage, mutual obligations for job seekers are suspended until the 22nd of May. I've actually written in 27th of April, but as I said yesterday, it was just updated to the 22nd of May. If you are seeking an exemption after the 22nd of May, or if the mutual obligations aren't continued to be suspended, or they kick back in, and you are seeking a major personal crisis exemption, then you do need to contact Centrelink. Again, continuing on in regards to major personal crisis exemption, students who are receiving youth allowance, students or other study-related payments who are in Australia but unable to attend studies due to coronavirus would be taken to have a reasonable excuse for not meeting study activity requirements for their payments. But again, you need to be contacting Centrelink. Now, if you are a personal carer, you may also claim this exemption if your child's school or childcare centre has been closed, or you're caring for an adult with a disability or special needs whose day service or supported workplace premises is closed in relation to COVID-19. Now, I've just written down the bottom there, if you have issues with your provider, call the department's National Customer Service line. And we're talking about provider, we're talking about your job service provider, places like JobActive or your disability employment services provider. Okay, call that number there if there is a particular issue that you're having. Okay, so I know I'm rattling through this pretty fast, and I hope you're all still with me. Now, we've spoken so far about the eligibility criteria for particular payments and the expanded eligibility in particular in relation as a result of the COVID-19 measures. Now, and with a number of people who are going on to Centrelink payments, and for those who are already on Centrelink payments, as I mentioned at the start, sometimes things go wrong, and sometimes Centrelink make a decision that you may disagree with. Now, if that happens, give us a call. Okay, we can give you some advice. But first of all, we need to understand what a decision is. And I gave some examples at the start, but I'll go through them again just quickly. For example, if you're not eligible for a payment, you've got your payment suspended or cancelled, or there's a debt. These are the types of decisions that you may disagree with. Now, if there's been no decision made, i.e. you put in an application for a particular payment, then that's a little bit more tricky. But if there's no decision regarding a claim for a payment after 13 weeks, then the law does consider that there's been a refusal of claim, and you can apply to review that refusal to an authorised review officer. So that's a technical point, and get in contact with us if there has been a failure on Centrelink's behalf to make a decision after 13 weeks. Now, if you do have one of these decisions and you want to challenge it, Centrelink have a internal review process which includes, well, primary starting point is getting a review from an officer called an authorised review officer. Okay, now they're an independent officer who will not have had anything to do with the original claim, and they look at the decision that's been made and gather information and make a decision as to whether or not that original decision was correct. Okay, so for example, you've had a debt raised against you for what Centrelink say is an overpayment. You challenge that, and an authorised review officer will look at the surrounding circumstances, look at the decision, and decide whether or not that was correct. Now, this is very important because a lot of people are contacting us and don't realise that they can take these steps to challenge a Centrelink decision. To do this, you can go to the Centrelink website and download a review of a decision form. And that form is SS351, and you can fill it in, and I'll show you a little bit more about how to fill it in. You can also just call Centrelink and ask them to do this, or write a letter requesting an authorised review officer. I recommend doing it in writing and keeping a record, and if you do lodge it in person, or if you request it over the phone, record the name of the person you're lodging the request to, the date of lodgement, and the receipt number. And remember, when you are lodging a request for an authorised review officer, mention the words authorised review officer. Okay, it is your right to obtain a review of a decision and get access to an authorised review officer. The review of the decision form does not explicitly state authorised review officer, so you may want to mention that on the form or as part of a letter on that form. Now, this is what the form itself will look like. Okay, it is a relatively straightforward form, but you can always call us to get assistance. The main two sections are question 13, which decision you want reviewed. Okay, an example might be decision to suspend youth allowance on my youth allowance on 20th of January 2020, or a decision that I was not eligible for the Jobseeker in October 2019. Okay, so pretty straightforward and simple information that is required. And why do you or your partner believe the decision is correct? Now, you can provide just, again, basic information, or you can provide a more comprehensive information if you'd like. You can include a letter explaining the circumstances. But here's some examples of what you might say. Now, it's obviously, these are just examples, just demonstrating that you just need to be clear about when it was and what exact payment that you're referring to, but otherwise there's not a significant amount of detail that's required. Okay, if you do decide to challenge a Centrelink decision, now this is the steps. These are the steps, or the tiers. First of all, you get a decision from Centrelink. Okay, then you request a review of that decision. What's important is to do that within 13 weeks of receiving that decision, except when we're talking about debts, but still I recommend doing it within 13 weeks. Then you appeal to an authorised review officer, and I've just shown you how to do that. And If you're not successful with that appeal to the authorised review officer, or the authorised review officer says upholds the original decision or makes an alternative decision that you disagree with, you can then appeal that decision as well, again within 13 weeks of receiving that decision from the authorised review officer, appeal that to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. Now, they're a separate body that review decisions by Centrelink, and it's a relatively straightforward process. There's instructions on the authorised review officer letter on how to appeal to the AAT, but you can do it by phone, online application, email, or letter. Now, there's two tiers to the AAT. First is the Social Services and Child Support Division, and if you are not successful at that tier, then you can appeal within 28 days of receiving that decision, or of them sending out that decision, to the second tier, which is the General Division of the AAT. Now, if you're going to the AAT, I highly recommend getting in touch with us, and we can chat you through the process, as well as potentially giving you some legal advice in regards to your matter. Up until that point, at the General Division, there's no cost. Okay, so we are very fortunate to live in a country that allows that, and to have that system where we can have these decisions reviewed. Of course, we don't want to have to go through this process, but it is those decisions are reviewable, and it is a free process up until that point. And then you can appeal decisions to the federal court. That's cross jurisdiction, and you have to have a legal error. But hopefully, you will have chatted to us before we even get anywhere near that. Okay, I am mindful of time, so I won't spend too much longer. But one issue we sadly do deal with is a number of people do call us up and have complaints and issues about their engagement with Centrelink. Now, Centrelink have a complaints line, and often we will be referring people to that. Unfortunately, we would like to assist people when they've got an issue with Centrelink, but sometimes it is just about lodging a complaint and making sure that, or trying to get some assistance through the complaints procedure. So, as I said, you can call up on that number. You can also do it through your MyGov account, and you can also provide a written written complaint as well. And if you're speaking to someone in person, you can request to speak to their manager, so someone at Centrelink. What's important is if you do make a complaint, that you are clear and factual about what happened, including the details, the time and date. Hopefully that will be information you can provide. Your return contact details, that's important. And what's really important as well is the outcome that you would like. Okay, so what would you like as a result of that complaint? And if you are lodging that complaint, record any reference number and the date that you lodge it. Now, Centrelink indicate that they should resolve, or they hope to contact you and resolve it within 10 working days. If they don't do that, then the Ombudsman, the Commonwealth Ombudsman in particular, is another body that can be sought out. They are a free service that, again, provides oversight to Commonwealth administrative functioning, essentially. And where Centrelink has failed to resolve a complaint, I would recommend getting in touch with the Ombudsman. That's their phone number there. You can also lodge an online form detailing your complaint with them. Okay, now there's no time frame, and there's no specific time frame that the Ombudsman are bound to. And there's some of the outcomes listed there. They may contact Centrelink to explain or get a resolution on the complaint. They may investigate and ask Centrelink to fix the issue if something's wrong. They may make recommendations, or they may provide you with better answers or explanations as to what's going on. Now, there is also the possibility that where it's merely that Centrelink have failed to make a decision, where they're taking a long time. For example, you've requested an authorised review officer to review your decision, but they're taking more than 13 weeks. Well, no, it's taking a long time. We've just put 13 weeks in there as a general number, because it's generally the time frame that we have to adhere to. If they are taking a long time, Centrelink, then contact the Ombudsman after you've made that complaint and ask for a certificate of unreasonable delay. Okay, if the Ombudsman issues that certificate, then that is essentially a finding that in the case of an authorised review officer failing to make a decision, that they've refused to make a decision. Now, what that does is opens jurisdiction up to the AAT. Now, again, I know it's a bit of a technical point, but what we find is, unfortunately, sometimes if an authorised review officer decision has not been made, then people are left in a tricky situation where they can't go anywhere legally. They need to have their issue resolved, and it's just not being progressed. And so this is one way of attempting to progress that through the law, and a legal mechanism to attempt to progress that. But again, you can get in touch with us to have a chat about that. Now, finally, I just want to mention debts in particular, because it is an issue that unfortunately many people in our community face, that we talk to at least. Debts to Centrelink. That's essentially where Centrelink have said, we've overpaid you, you now owe us a debt. Now, what's significant as part of these new COVID-19 measures is that Centrelink have paused raising or recovering most new debts for the next 6 months. Now, an exception to that is fraud and other serious non-compliance cases. And if you are currently repaying a debt, you can get in touch with Centrelink to ask to put your payments on hold. They will probably ask you about your financial circumstances and the reason why you're seeking that. But of course, with any debts, if you believe that a debt has been raised against you or is incorrect or should be waived, and even if it was correct, it can be waived on the basis of special circumstances or administrative error, call us at SSRV, give us a buzz. We're here to help, and these are the exact type of matters that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Okay, I know I've covered a lot, and I've probably used up all our time, but and I do apologise. But I'm going to hand over to Anna if we've still got time, and Anna will, as I said, will go through the intersection between social security and family violence. So I'll hand over to Anna now.
Sorry, I'm just finding my PowerPoint. Okay, here we go. So my name is Anna. I'm the community lawyer at Social Security Rights Victoria, working on our family violence project. It explores the intersection between family violence and social security law through research and advocacy work. We also provide advice and do some casework for family violence clients and workers. And we also do a bit of community legal education around it as well. So that's what we're doing today. So firstly, I'm going to discuss how COVID-19 intersects with family violence. So generally, after emergency or disaster situations, we've seen in the past a spike in family violence. So if you think of like the bushfires or remember the Christchurch earthquakes, there's a stats that show an increase in family violence. So it's anticipated that family violence will increase due to the pandemic, and we've already seen some reports of COVID-19 being used by family violence perpetrators, threatening people to stay inside, because they've got COVID-19, or inviting people over who have COVID-19, saying they're going to infect people. So we've seen sort of direct examples of using the pandemic to perpetrate family violence. So the reason why we generally see a spike in family violence is due to an increased financial insecurity. So as we all know, a lot of people have lost their jobs, and we also see insecurity around housing because of that. They can't pay their rent. Also, you've got families spending much more time together due to quarantine, and so there's tensions within the house. There's also, because of the restrictions and because people might be working from home or lost their jobs, spending more time at home, there's less opportunities for family violence victims to seek help. So they're always around the perpetrator. It's harder to get a moment alone, to contact a service, or, you know, find a reason to go out and seek help. So that's sort of some of the reasons why we see family violence increase during a pandemic. So how does family violence intersect with social security law? Or social security rather. So what we've seen through our casework, and also what Economic Justice Australia, they did a great report on social security and domestic violence. And it intersects in a variety of ways, but some of the main ways are that debts will be raised from people providing incorrect information to Centrelink. So it could be someone's deliberately told Centrelink false information, and then that's raised a debt for the family violence victim. We see suspension of payments or debts being raised due to family violence victims not being able to comply with activity requirements due to their situation. So because they've had to flee a family violence situation, or they've suffered other health consequences due to family violence, and it's become quite difficult to comply with activity requirements to receive their benefits. So they're the main ones. The other one is membership of a couple. Centrelink you might be receiving a payment at a single rate, so parenting payment for a single, and Centrelink then say, no, we think you're in a couple, and raise a debt saying you should have been on the payment for a couple. And, the person might think, well, that's not really fair. I'm in a relationship, but it's very on and off again. And a family violence relationship is very volatile. So we see sort of situations like that. There's many more, but I'll sort of skip through to the next thing. And if people want to ask questions about it, I can come back to it. I'll just mention because I think I saw people asking about newly arrived residents. We also see people who are in fleeing family violence situations, and they're a newly arrived resident and there's a waiting period, so they're stuck without any income at all after leaving that relationship. So those are sort of the main ones. So I've gone too far. Oh, I haven't. Okay, so what are your options if you are experiencing family violence? So one is activity exemption. So you can apply for an activity exemption. So if you're receiving Jobseeker and you can't comply with your employment plan, or job plan, you can contact Centrelink and ask for an exemption to that activity. So there's two types of exemptions. One is directly for domestic violence, and that applies to people who are the principal carer of a child, and you need to apply within 26 weeks. Let me start that again. So you have to have been subject to domestic violence within 26 weeks prior to the exemption being granted. Or if it's beyond that, there is a provision that allows where there are special circumstances. So you might say that, you couldn't apply within that time due to your housing situation or something like that. So that's the exemption specifically for domestic violence. There is a broader one where you don't have to be the principal carer of a child to apply, and that's just called special circumstances. So family violence would fall under the umbrella of special circumstances. That exemption, the circumstances have to make it so that it would be unreasonable for you to comply with the activity test for that period. And they can give you an exemption of a maximum of 13 weeks. So how to apply for those is by contacting Centrelink. on your payment line, so the Jobseeker line if you get Jobseeker, or you can notify them through the app or MyGov. And another thing to do may be to ask to speak with a Centrelink social worker. This also goes for if you are experiencing family violence and applying for a payment, you can flag with Centrelink and the social worker that what your situation is, and that might be helpful in the future should issues come up with complying with your activity requirements, or if you get a debt or something, there's a record on there that you've been experiencing family violence. Okay, the next one is, it's very similar to Jobseeker, activity exemptions for youth allowance. Again, there's two, one directly for domestic violence, one is a broader special circumstances exemption. The domestic violence one, again, is for someone who is the principal care of a child. And again, it's that they grant the exemption within 26 weeks of the domestic violence. And that's a 16-week maximum exemption. And the special circumstances one is 13 weeks. So it's very similar to the Jobseeker payment, Jobseeker exemption, sorry. Same thing. And parenting payment also has an activity exemption. Again, it's you've been subject to domestic violence in 26 weeks before the exemption is given, and there's special circumstances that make it appropriate to make the determination. And again, that's 16 weeks maximum exemption. So the last one I want to talk about is seeking a waiver of the debt. So most of the family violence cases that we see usually involve a debt. And the legislation, it doesn't specifically define family violence, and there's no waiver of a debt specifically for family violence, but you can appeal the debt on the grounds of special circumstances if you have been experiencing family violence. So special circumstances covers a range of factors, circumstances, and family violence is one of those. So basically to appeal on the grounds of seek a waiver of your debt on the grounds of special circumstances, the debt has to, the debt can't be from yourself or another person knowingly making a false statement or false representation, or failing or omitting to comply with provision of the Act. So that can be a little bit tricky where an ex-partner has reported something, deliberately reported something to Centrelink, and then a debt has been raised against the family violence victim, and then they're still held responsible. So that's something to be aware of with another person knowingly making a false statement. So that's the first part, is that, knowingly, the debt hasn't resulted from knowingly making a false statement or false representation. The next part is that there are special circumstances that make it desirable to waive the debt. So you may, as Bryn was talking about in regard to the appeals process, so when you're appealing your debt, you may say, I didn't realise that I didn't knowingly make this report to Centrelink, and at the time the debt was incurred, I was experiencing family violence, I had to flee my house, I had housing issues. You could also talk about any other circumstances at the time that were impacting your ability to comply with your obligations to Centrelink. So it could be mental health, physical health, anything like that. It can't solely be financial hardship, but you can include that as well. And then the last part for the waiver of the debt is that it's more appropriate for the debt to be waived than to be written off. So what that means is basically it's in the department's interest to waive the debt. So, you know, say, okay, we won't chase you for this, we'll let this go, rather than suspend the debt for a period of time. So that's probably, you know, where talking about the hardship might come into it and say, look, you know, these are my circumstances. It's not really in the department's interest to pursue this debt. Yeah, and the last bit is providing evidence to support your appeal. So this can be reports from medical practitioners, letters of support from your counsellors, caseworkers, social workers, police reports, IVOs, or any other kind of documentation that supports your case that at the time the debt was incurred, you had special circumstances. So yeah, and just finally, so this is the type of assistance that we can provide. So as Bryn said before, we provide, you know, legal advice over the telephone. We can also provide some representation and reviewing of documentation depending on circumstances of the matter, and resources. And then this is just, some family violence services if people need to get in touch. So Safe Steps is probably the best one in terms of getting immediate help and being directed to immediate help. But yeah, so that's it. Sorry, I rushed through, but I'm conscious of time.
Thanks, Anna. That was incredibly helpful. And thank you to you too, Bryn. That was really, really comprehensive, and we've had really positive feedback from people listening in. For those that have watched and have just taken in lots and lots of information, this video will be available on Facebook Live afterwards, as well as on the YACVic website. We'll post some more information, as well as the links that Anna and Bryn have provided to help you out. We have a few questions that have come in, quite a few. We might start just by asking, a few people have asked, where do I go for more information if I have general questions? Where can I find general information about income support payments, and who can I contact if I want to learn more?
Yeah, so great questions. And I did refer earlier in the video to a slide which had a list of websites that I'd recommend people go back to if you can do that as part of the video. But otherwise, social security rights, that's what we're here for. We have links on our websites to certain resources, and you can contact us, as we said, for our general advice line, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And again, our contact details have been, I think, posted in the chat, as well as on the video there and on our website. And our peak body, Economic Justice Australia, has some really great self-help resources. If you go to their website and you click on self-help, there's a whole bunch of great fact sheets and resources there that I'd highly recommend people have a look into. And of course, Services Australia has their website, which has got all of the basic information, and we can assist you in navigating those particular that website and other relevant documents as well when you call us. So yeah, we're here to not only give you advice, but also help you to navigate information. So just give us a call.
Perfect, thank you so much. And those fact sheets from Economic Justice Australia are amazing. I've had a look through them. We've got a few questions. I should note that some of them Bryn and Anna might not be able to answer because some of them get a bit technical. The first one is about parental income. This has come from a person that I presume is applying for something like youth allowance or Jobseeker. They have two parents that work full time and earn around $50,000 a year each. Am I eligible for any payments?
Yeah, so I don't want to give advice over the over the video. I think that'd be a bit irresponsible. What we really want to encourage people to do is give us a call so we can talk through your individual circumstances. I could say yes, no, whatever over this this video conference, but the reality is we need to hear all of the different circumstances for you and for you as an individual, and that's what our general advice line is for. Of course, you can also use those other resources, and I always do recommend that people have a flick through as a starting point the Guide to Australian Government Payments. I'm going to repeat that, a Guide to Australian Government Payments. It's a simple resource that's relatively straightforward, and it has all of the basic eligibility and qualification criteria set out, and you can navigate it on the website. When you click on the names of the particular payments, you can click through to it clicks through to the particular page, the particular payment and eligibility criteria. So have a look as a starting point, but always get in touch as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. The next few questions are about casuals. Someone's asked that they can no longer work because of COVID-19, but they're a casual but haven't been there for 12 months. Is there anything I can access?
This one's a little bit of a tricky one. It is going to be difficult in terms of the Jobkeeper program, but look into the Jobseeker program still, and give us a call so that we can talk about the time frame that you have and your particular circumstances. Again, I'm sorry I keep deflecting it off, but we need to chat through your particular circumstances, and Jobseeker may be appropriate.
Yeah, that sounds right. The Jobkeeper requirements are quite complex. On that note, there was another question about Jobkeeper, which was, does Jobkeeper work if you commenced work on, I won't say the date, but after the 1st of March in casual employment? I can probably answer this one after being at our last Jobkeeper webinar, but I don't believe so. Again, don't want to give specific advice, but for the most part, Jobkeeper is for persons that are working before or on the 1st of March. That being said, the circumstances might change, and also some of the requirements for Jobkeeper have also changed over the last couple of weeks. So if you want to learn more about Jobkeeper, you can chat to the Young Workers Centre here in Victoria, going to youngworkers.org.au. Keeping in mind that Jobkeeper, as Bryn said, is sort of separate to Centrelink payments that we've been talking about. There is another person asked about casual work, stating that they, I presume because of visa requirements, are only allowed to work 20 hours a week, but have now dropped down to 8 to 12 hours a week. So they're just working fewer hours. They're asking if they might be eligible for a payment on that basis. But I think what their question probably goes to more is the eligibility about international persons that aren't Australian residents. And on that note, we've also sort of had questions around which visas are eligible for youth allowance or Jobseeker, which I think is sort of the question that's been raised quite a bit.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. There's a number of people who are on temporary visas that just aren't eligible for payments, and it's something that we're working really hard to lobby the government on, because there are people who are falling through the cracks, and many people on temporary visas, even people who've lived here for a long period of time. For example, certain New Zealanders who have lived here for a very long time, who who's live here permanently, whose family's here, etc., who do not qualify for certain payments, and that will apply for a range of different temporary visa holders. Unfortunately, they're just not covered. You can look at the Guide to Australian Government Payments and also the Services Australia website to check out basic eligibility criteria, and there is it does set out which visas apply, and there's also a number of migration law firms which are providing summaries as to their the visa categories and the way in which the COVID-19 measures are being rolled out for those visa categories. So you can do a quick Google search for that, and they'll provide some good summaries. But again, you're going back to the basic eligibility criteria.
And I should say on that note, you sort of touched on this, but we had 2 or 3 questions from New Zealand nationals who are living in Australia or studying in Australia, who don't usually have access to Centrelink payments. You kind of partly answered this, but at the moment, the eligibility criteria doesn't extend to those people. Is that correct?
Again, we want people to contact us, to be able to give specific advice around that. But yes, it is going to be tricky unless you've been living here for 10 years. And again, I don't want to get into the specifics of it because it will depend on that person's particular circumstances. But yes, we see many New Zealanders who just fall outside of the categories that are being assisted. So yeah, it is very unfortunate, and I've unfortunately had to speak to a number of people who we just can't provide assistance to, or we can provide some direction to, but the government are just not providing that social security to. So yeah, and it is heartbreaking, unfortunately.
Yeah, of course. And I should say that YACVic and a number of other organisations like the Australian Council of Social Services is lobbying the government at the moment to include a greater number of people in that, including international students and some of the people that we've been talking about, because they really should be covered by these payments. The final sort of question theme we've had is from some students. They've asked, I got the first economic support payment because I'm a student, but I'm about to defer my studies. This is very specific, Bryn. If I defer my studies, will I get the second payment? And would they potentially be eligible for Jobseeker as they now have reduced hours in their studies?
Give us a call. And we can chat through your individual circumstances. It depends on whether or not they're going to continue to be eligible for that particular payment. If they are eligible for the payment, then they should, and they are still receiving that payment, then they should receive the second supplement. The second economic stimulus supplement.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, that's really helpful. I think that's the question they're asking. On that note, we've actually had some feedback saying that a lot of young people have found the Services Australia website really hard to decipher and navigate, and some young people have told us that as well. And people here are really appreciative of sharing some additional information and providing it in a different way, so thank you. I think one of the overarching messages from this evening is that a lot of this stuff is really, really complex. And Anna and Bryn are experts, and so if you're having problems or you're having some of these specific problems or experiences, that it's really important to reach out to the right people. And Social Security Rights Victoria have their phone line and can provide more specific advice. So I just want to say thank you again to Anna and Bryn for joining us. It was amazing. It was so much information. And it was really helpful and answered a lot of the questions that people have been asking. We've got more people saying thank you in the chat box as well. Again, thank you. If you have any more questions, please send them through to YACVic on our Facebook page or by emailing info@yacvic.org.au. But if you have specific questions about what we've spoken about tonight, about income support payments, about the relationship between income support payments and family or domestic violence, please contact Social Security Rights Victoria, and we've provided their general advice line again, as well as the rural advice line. I know we have a few people from rural and regional Victoria and the youth sector joining us this evening. You can look out for the next webinar that YACVic will be hosting by going to our website, yacvic.org.au. Thank you again for joining us, and stay safe. We look forward to seeing you next time.